Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited today. We've got a great panel. We have so much meat to get into with you all. It's also Fashion Week, so some of you usually have busier schedules this week, so we're also really happy to have you join us. We'll start off with quick intros. My name is Khuyen. I write The Cakewalk on Substack. I'm an alumni of IFM. And so thank you to IFM for giving us this lovely space, again, during Fashion Week. And yeah, Laurent?
Welcome everybody. First of all, thank you for coming on such short notice for this cool event on Substack. I have a question for you. Who is on Substack actually? Wow, so there is a community here. So I'm Laurent. I write as well on internet culture, pop culture, and a bit of fashion here and there. I used to be a fashion blogger as well, and I make a living.
Once upon a time.
Exactly, once upon a time. I make a living selling creative aids for luxury brands. And I'm very happy to be joined by three amazing speakers and Substack writers and authors.
Yeah, and really quick before I have them introduce themselves, I just want to quickly say too, we're not affiliated with Substack. We just happen to be talking about Substack today, but we also have some people from Substack here with us, so we're very happy to have you join us. Yeah, between the five of us, we all have very different experiences in the industry, so we hope to cover all of that. We have also different timelines on Substack. I think I have the shortest one. I've been on it for less than a year now, and some of us longer. So yeah, let's start with Yanique. Want to present yourself?
Sure.
Really quick?
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Yanique Francis. I'm behind My Parisian Life, which is a travel agency that I started over 10 years ago. I'm a tour guide and a professor, and recently started on Substack.
I'm Lindsey Tramuta. I am a journalist and have been writing about culture and news and societal issues in Paris and the rest of France for quite a long time. And I think I transferred my newsletter that existed elsewhere, I want to say now over 2 years ago, onto Substack, and haven't really looked back.
Thank you. Hi everybody, my name is Chelsey Pippin Mizzi. I'm an author and a tarot reader for writers, artists, and creatives, and I write The Shuffle on Substack. I've been running that publication for about 1.5 years now, and I love working there. Like Lindsey, I transferred my existing list over there and have seen a lot of growth and really enjoyed building what was an email list into a creative home for a lot of my work.
And not to mention, I think everyone here except for me is an author, so you can check out their books later. Yeah, okay, so let's just get into it and start. Can you each tell us a bit about your background and whether or not the transition to Substack has been a natural one or not? Lindsey, you kind of prefaced that you were already writing a newsletter.
Yeah, I mean, so I actually started a newsletter back in 2017 when my first book was about to come out, because I felt like I needed to figure out a way to get people interested in hearing from me more often. And I never worked on a newsletter format when I worked in digital marketing and advertising, and I thought, well, okay, I know what MailChimp is. Except that what you discover is MailChimp is very expensive very quickly once you're growing a subscriber base. And what happened was I partnered with a bike tour company in Paris on a win a trip to Paris giveaway to help promote the launch of my first book, which included a flight on Air France. So obviously there was like this really nice package to offer people. And one of the things they had to do, the participants, was to fill out a form and sign up for my newsletter. So of course I got an absolute deluge of subscribes, and then of course much later a lot of unsubscribes when they're like, oh wait, I didn't win, I don't care about this. But it actually did help come up with a sort of launch strategy for having this newsletter, regardless of who was hosting it. Down the road, the community kept growing, and it became far too expensive for me to work with, and so I knew I needed to shift. At the time, Substack was already starting to emerge. I heard about the sort of I don't know, I wouldn't call it a fellowship, I guess, but the sort of activation to get writers onto the platform. And I thought, oh, I don't know, you know, I'm going to sit on the sidelines and see how this develops. And I actually worked with a friend who was launching a publishing platform as her beta tester for at least a year, until she emailed me one day and said, this didn't work, so I'm closing up shop, but you know, download your newsletter, your subscriber list, your email list, and you know, go forth on another platform. And so it was between seeing whether it was the time for me to come up with something that would allow me to test the waters with the payment tiers, or go on a platform like Ghost, or is it Pretty Notes? What is that company called? Tiny Notes? Yeah. Anyway, Flowdesk, whatever they're called. And so I thought, you know what, there seems to be, I've gotten inklings about high discoverability within Substack, kind of like how YouTube has really high discoverability, and I thought, you know what, let's see, what's the worst that can happen? All my needs were send people emails to their inbox, and everything else was going to be bonus. And so that's sort of how it happened.
Okay, so very organically.
Yeah.
Chelsey, what about you? Was it kind of organic? Did you feel sort of pressured maybe just because everyone else is doing it? Let's jump on the bandwagon, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is no, I don't think I felt any pressure. I had been dabbling on the platform before I launched the Shuffle for a while. I signed up for Substack in its early days, and I played with the idea of publishing micro essays there for a period of time right when I moved to France from the UK, and that publication went defunct. I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen, but I knew I liked the idea of my work living somewhere that wasn't in an email list. I was running my tarot business at the same time, and I was using Flowdesk, and I found it sad that my work was hiding in inboxes and there wasn't anywhere for people to find the archives of things that I was working really hard on writing. I see writing as a quest for connection, and the idea that people were missing connections with me because there were things that they hadn't signed up to receive that I'd worked really hard on weren't available to them. And I found maintaining an email list and a blog a little overwhelming for me as somebody who was also trying to start a business and was working full time at the same time I was working in PR. And so I knew that I liked the idea of having a platform that was a combined mailing list and archive. That was really important to me. I was running video based workshops a lot of the time as well, and so there was something to the appeal, especially as Substack progressed, of letting those workshops live in that same place as well. The idea that people could find me there was really enticing. And so I knew that was building. I'd written a book that was a week-by-week guide to writing tarot for yourself. I thought that could be a really cool way into building a platform around that. And I sat on it, and somewhere in between the publication of my first and second book, I went, I think this is the time. And it really bloomed from there. It bloomed from this idea of a weekly tarot reading to a publication that felt like a bit of a palette for everything that I wanted to catch in a catch-all. I called the publication the Shuffle because, of course, I'm a tarot reader. I shuffle a deck of cards, but also I wanted there to be an expectation from readers that they were going to find lots of different material there at the intersection of spirituality and creativity. I didn't just want to be talking about tarot. I do Jungian work as well. I do a lot of, I grew up in the Christian church but left it, but I find a lot of Christian symbology really interesting. And so I wanted there to be an expansive space, and I found that space.
Yeah, so it just made sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a short answer.
Yeah.
I'm not known for a short answer.
I don't think any of us are, so you're in good company.
Well, that's the other thing I will add, the long form nature
Yes.
of the readership on Substack is a real draw for me.
TLDR, aka Too Long Didn't Read, is very much the theme of Substack writing and just newsletter writing in general these days. And then Yanique, you also had a newsletter before, and you're newer to the platform.
So my story is kind of funny because I've been hearing a lot of great things about Substack, and I was just like, another platform, another application, like, no thank you.
Same, honestly.
And it wasn't until I think a year and a half ago, I was just like, let me just see what this is about, because so I get an alert every time I get someone who subscribed to my newsletter and my email, and so weekly I'm getting all these alerts, and I'm like, oh my god, people really want my newsletter, but I wasn't really putting out a newsletter regularly. And so the reflection was, what if I could take it somewhere other than MailChimp, which was costing a fortune, which is why I wasn't really also creating as much as I wanted to, because I'm just like, oh my God, this is so crazy expensive. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna check what's going on with this Substack thing. So I go on Substack and someone has my name. And I'm like, what? Who is this person? Like, you don't know me?
Yeah.
And
It's
so
not
I,
My Parisian Life.
right, so I messaged this person, and then it kind of became sort of this sort of battle to get my name. And because I fought so hard for it, that was kind of like my, oh my God, this is gonna be my thing. Substack's gonna be my thing. So Substack then did really become my thing, actually.
Awesome. Laurent, what's your experience with
So my
starting?
experience is slightly different. I'm a frustrated old blogger. Actually, I studied something like 12 years ago in fashion blogging. And actually, I don't look like a fashion blogger, not by today's standards at least. But I used to write a lot for a news magazine called Express Style, which back in days, when it comes to fashion, was something pretty important because of long form, because you had a quality of journalists, because you had a quality of the long form writing as well. And then I totally missed the Instagram, I would say, train, because I didn't feel like it was my platform. I couldn't really see myself posting selfies. I didn't really understand how I could, sort of build a character of myself. So when suddenly Substack came, actually, I started to follow some interesting people that reminded me the old days of the internet. A bit the weirdos, the creative misfits, all these people that love actually text, that love telling you a story, which is not just an impulse story or something a bit vanilla, a bit too easy and comfortable. Most of the people I started to follow actually were people who were not in my line, not really in my trade. And that's how we end up as well with this community here, is that we don't talk at all of the same stuff, yet I discover things about tarot reading and spirituality, and that's the beauty of this. And there's also, going back to you, Khuyen, and why did you start actually?
My experience is also different from everyone else's. I never wrote a newsletter leading up to this. I wasn't ever planning to be a writer or anything, but I was launching my online concept store soon, and every brand has a newsletter. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna write a newsletter anyways. Substack seems to be the place everyone's hopping on. I feel like I sort of felt the pressure because it was trending and everyone was around me was starting to talk about it. So I had a friend who was like, yeah, just do it. Like, I make some money off of it. Like, I make an extra $2K a year or something. I'm like, oh, she just writes like little guides that like aren't that groundbreaking. But she's like, yeah, just do it. Like, it's no big deal. So I was like, it's not gonna hurt me. Let's just do that. But actually that leads me to this new idea where, so everyone on Substack seems to discuss this idea of being a Substacker. And there's this sort of like identity that's associated with just writing on the platform. But at the end of the day, it's a platform. So with you guys specifically, everyone sort of wrote already before, whether it was just in your work prior to, or you already had a newsletter. For me, it's been less than a year, and I will say that I've been kind of toting this I'm a Substacker vibe for the past year. But recently I've been seeing, some conversation around this where it's like, this person writes a Substack actually called Wordloaf, and yesterday he actually announced his departure from the platform, which I'll reference a little bit more later in the talk. But one of the reasons he quoted for leaving is because he doesn't want his identity associated with Substack. He's like, I write a newsletter about bread. It's called Wordloaf. That's what I do. I'm not a Substacker. It's not a Substack. It's like someone, I don't know, taking authority over Amazon and like turning that into a verb. Like, how do you guys feel about that? Do you feel like your identity has become sort of Substack since being on it, or you're still very much your own entity?
I feel like I'm pretty much still my own entity. I just see it as an extension of what I do and the way that I communicate with my community, my audience, my clients. But at the same time, I also do see myself as a Substacker, and I'm also very proud of that. So I think,
I guess you can have both.
yeah.
I've just been very reluctant to take on any of the terms for any platform. You know, I think the inclination to label people allows us to understand what they're doing for a living, which is something we naturally do. And so for me, it feels like a holdover from the days of blogging, where we would call everyone a blogger, and then you would be, you know, when you're a journalist, you get really irritated when someone would call you a blogger. And
it's also adjacent to influencing.
Exactly,
yeah.
Influencing, and then when everyone started launching a podcast, you know, you're a podcaster, it's like, well, you actually do audio, whatever, they're just shorthands, and I don't think of myself as, I wouldn't identify myself with those categories. Rather, I'd say I'm a writer with a newsletter that's hosted on Substack, and it's a great community.
Yeah.
Or I have a podcast that, you know, has run for many years, and it's great, but it's one piece of what I do, and I think that's also been my strategy with all of these things is, kind of like investing, you're supposed to diversify your portfolio. I try to diversify my career because I don't trust that anything is going to be around for my future. So it's out of fear maybe that I do these things. But ultimately, you know, I'm reassured by people who, very, very smart people, extremely talented writers who I've connected with, who I know who launched a newsletter on there and maybe use all the functionalities that you know, that platform has to offer that I may not be using or yet, and I think I feel smarter for the most part from what I've read on there, and I know this will be a question we get to or a comment we want to discuss, but I do think that it's like anything where people will fizzle out, and so, you know, is it a fad to say you're a Substacker? Maybe, but just like, you know, there was TikToker and you know,
so we were something before
Yeah.
a platform. And
what really,
after,
maybe the
hopefully.
correct word is creator, writer, and that's a more apt way of looking at it.
Chelsey, how do you feel?
Yeah, well, I think these are brilliant points that I'm on board with. For me, I think the most important thing is that I like being on Substack as a writer. I find the experience for me is mostly good. The people that I interact with there, the community that I've cultivated there is mostly good. And so I'm very happy to if a publication wanted to call me a Substacker, fine. It's probably not the first thing that I'm going to pull out of my own pocket, in the same way that I've operated on Instagram for years, and I would probably not call myself an Instagrammer, though I'm doing murmur, right? But I think about a conversation I have with a client a lot who is even not in the self-conscious way, but wary to call herself a writer. She calls herself someone who writes and finds a lot of power in saying, this is something that I do, this is something that I spend my time with, but it doesn't define who I am or how I show up to the world. And if today I don't write, that's okay. Maybe tomorrow I write. And I think about that in the way that I show up to everything, really. This is a thing that I do, it's a thing that I can take or leave. And if I choose to do it, it's because I want to be there.
So that's really interesting because Substack caught me at a time that I was transitioning out of fashion. I had been in it for the past decade, doing PR, styling, events, a lot of different things. And I wanted to go into food more, and I also wanted to develop my concept store more that also is about food. And so I feel like it just naturally became my identity, or I felt that it did. And I also don't have any qualms or complaints about it because I've built a fantastic community off of Substack. I've been able to connect with so many people worldwide in a way that I wouldn't have been able to before. And this has just given me a voice in a way that I hadn't before. But with that said, I also want to start keeping in mind that these were my concepts before being on this platform. So while I'm happy to be called a Substacker and call myself that, I'm also just Queen, writing on Substack.
Yeah, I tend to totally agree with you. For me, the platform is more a sort of society of communities, because you need to deserve your community, you need to earn this community, I mean, at various levels. And I feel like it's something where you need to give a lot to actually be called a community. Otherwise, I mean, you are just a tech platform or just someone that produces content, but in the end, you are not truly a sort of community activist or community networker and so on. Which leads us to another question to you guys. Substack has been adding a lot of new features, like any other platform in a way, like the notes, the videos, new ways to connect and network. So how active are you actually on the platform itself?
Like there's a notes section of it where it's kind of acting like Twitter, and now there's like a new live stream thing and everything. Like how active are you guys?
I'm more voyeuristic. Well, I'm voyeuristic to a degree. I have definitely, because I was so distraught over the end of Twitter, X. Notes came in at a good time where, again, those intelligent people, some of whom I may have already been following on Twitter, were also leaving commentary and sharing their ideas in this notes section. However, it also did come at a time where I needed, for my own sanity, to take a little bit of a step away from the constant stream of commentary. And so I dip in and I dip out. I do find that it's quite wonderful when you engage with people who are posting on notes. You see actually how quickly you can enter a discussion with other people. So I've seen this happen for myself, and I've seen it happen for a friend of mine who's a fiction writer and has managed to find this entire community that I don't see because I'm not in the fiction arena, where they have this, like it was with blogging, where they would support each other and someone would ask something and one of the other members of the fiction writing community comes out and has an answer within an hour. And so I see that brewing, and I do think that that's something quite special, and that relates to this idea of community. I've also watched live videos, not regularly, because I'm partial to the written word, so I tend not to highlight the other features or take them in as a consumer.
That's just what works for you. Yeah.
For now.
Yeah. But I get that with the community building, because I feel like notes for now is still has an authentic component where you're really discovering communities through that and what people have to say. And I feel like, I don't know, it's more unabashed, like everyone is just free posting and there's less filtering like the way Instagram would be or whatnot. But at the same time, it's kind of funny because there will be people too who say, oh, posting on notes is so humbling because, the 2 likes that you get, this means like, you don't know how much this means. Like this translates to like something else on Instagram, And I found that myself too, but yeah. How about you guys, Chelsey?
Yeah, I am a dabbler, but not a consistent user of new features. I like to see how it feels, and I may be slow to adapt, but I'm never anti trying something out. What I love about notes, which I use inconsistently, is that is no matter where you find yourself on the notes script and the feed, those are all writers, and so some of the most beautiful experiences I've had on Substack have been on rare notes that I post. I share my wins as a writer, and everyone who sees it gets it because everyone on there is writing, is looking for that same feeling of feeling seen as a writer, and I found that really gratifying. When I talk about my personal work, when I reshare my post, maybe I'm getting those 2 likes, but I shared the very first time I earned out royalties on my book, and I had this huge community of writers who I'd never met, who I'd never interacted with before, congratulating and celebrating me, and they knew what that meant. And that was important to me.
That's what I found. Like, there's no vanity there. There's so many people who are like, I've been on this platform for 2 years, and I just got my first paid subscriber. And are celebrating it, and everyone's celebrating each other, and that's really nice because I feel like if you did that on Instagram or anywhere else, it'd be like, okay,
I was to that point. I was gonna say that I think it kind of feels notes. The functionality of notes feels like what Instagram felt like in the beginning, where you could kind of almost just post anything and not worry so much about like being judged. So I kind of dabble in the notes section, which is great. I just use it like little snippets of life in Paris. For me, it's really kind of like a place where I feel like I don't want to save this on my phone, and I don't know where to put it. And I'm just like, well, there's notes. Let's see if I can put it there. So I actually put stuff on notes that I have no idea where to put it, and it works quite well actually.
Yeah, I kind of approach it as like no filter, whereas my Instagram stories or feed, like I'll overthink it for a month and then not post it still. And how about you? You're pretty active on notes.
Yeah, well, because I'm active as much as I can everywhere.
Yeah.
No, but I think there's something super interesting is the sort of messy environment, the serendipity approach to it, because indeed there's a lot of weird stuff that appears on this sort of nose feed. I don't even know if we can call it a feed, actually. And I think what you're very right is that there is something extremely infatuating, I dare to say, because suddenly you're going to be pulled in things that otherwise in other platforms you are not served to. So there is something fairly beautiful in that. And I just have a question for the crowd. Like, are you active on Notes, for instance? And for the, I mean, how many French speakers do we have in that room? Yeah. And do you get, I would say, French notes, or do you get a blend, a mix of everything? Both? Okay. But yeah, I think the messy thing is something really, really attractive, which leads me to a new question. So it's something I've read a lot, especially in the American press, and also on Substack actually, that there would be a sort of divide and opposition between legacy media and Substack writers. So legacy media, as in New York Times, Washington Post, L'Express in France, versus sort of authentic writing on Substack. So what is your take on that one? I mean, is there an opposition really, or is it very American? I mean, what's your point?
Well, so I mean, I've never been on staff at any of the publications, but I do write for legacy media. And I've always, because I'm a freelancer, I've always sort of seen newsletter and social media communities as an extension. And I would never say that one replaces the other. However, legacy media is in a critical state, and not only in the US, but in France too. But there is a different perspective on what Substack can offer. Also, there are plenty of people from legacy media in America who've launched their own media network, so not even on Substack, just gone way beyond. However, if you think about how, it's Pete Krugman, I think, who left, who resigned or ended his column at the New York Times that he had for 20, 30 years, and is now doing what he, a sort of unedited, really unfiltered view of what he was doing for the Times now on Substack, and he posts, I believe, daily, like a lot of the political commentators do, and it's thriving, and so I think the opportunity for journalists is to try to cultivate their own following. However, I do think there will be a breaking point where readers, as much as they love what you do, can't afford to support everybody. So if you are going to have material as good as it is behind a paywall, and only behind a paywall, that I do think that we're going to reach a critical point where, I mean, I've gotten messages from subscribers who have unsubscribed not because they didn't enjoy the work, but just that they have to shuffle who they follow, because, you know, if they're, I mean, I know, if I actually looked at my Excel spreadsheet with all of the subscriptions I have to Substacks and media and streaming platforms, I mean, I think I'd probably faint from my expenditures. So I understand. And so some of these journalists can command that because of their, you know, their cachet and their heritage within these publications. But I don't know how long. And then maybe they go to a true media sort of landscape in a more traditional sense.
I actually see it as complementary. I don't think it clashes in any particular way. I just feel like, you know, for me, a lot of the people that I follow for news on Substack, I'm aware that it's not legacy type writing, and that's why I appreciate it even more. So I think it's great the way it is, actually.
The French media is more conservative, though. Just I've noticed this from a few French editors who have Substacks and who have been told by their editorial leadership that they are uncomfortable with their presence on the platform. So I think, whereas U.S. media has sort of, you know, they're not new to these, you know, having a blog or having a social media platform while also being a journalist, even though there are ethical, you know, there's ethical etiquette to respect. I think, and this is not surprising to me, but there is sort of a slow to embrace the fact that journalists on staff at a French publication might also have, you know, the desire and freedom to write on Substack.
Well, I think that's interesting because I think in France here, my experience as well is just they really want to put you in a box, and it's hard to be able to wear multiple hats, even though most people do these days.
But it's also a competition issue. I think they're editorial competition, and
but I feel like that checks out. Yeah. Chelsey?
Yeah, I'll speak from a more lifestyle and cultural point of view, which is where my background is in. I got started as a writer at BuzzFeed UK in its nascent days covering books and working with authors. I commissioned a lot of writers to write essays inspired by their books, and it was a really beautiful time for me. And of course then saw the conflict between that new media versus legacy media happening in real time, and lost my job in 2018 along with most of the staff there at that publication. And I do think we cycle through that conflict and tension between what's new and who's being seen virally versus what people trust, and we're always having a reckoning there. I will say that I think Substack is great for culture writers, legacy or otherwise, because it offers a kaleidoscope of a lot of different points of view that you're not going to be able to fit in the pages of the culture section or in a Sunday magazine. I'm in a freelancing group, and I submitted a pitch for feedback a couple of weeks ago, and the leader said, Chelsey, this is great, but nobody cares about work for writers. If you want to write for writers, no publication is going to pay you to do it. And I said, great, my subscribers will pay me to do it on Substack. So it was really nice to go, okay, the idea is good, but the place isn't there in legacy, but I have a place where I know that there's vested interest in that. And so, I think it balances each other out, to speak back to complementary there.
I just want to say one thing, which was a piece of advice I got from someone who also comes from legacy media, but who has a very, very large platform on Substack called The Ink. And he said, build it and they will come. And so his thinking was, I'm not going to wait around for someone to commission me the story that I know that I deserve to write or to dig into. I'm going to do it myself. And he has put his full-time effort into building out The Ink, which has 90,000 subscribers, and I don't know how many of those are paid, but I'm sure a significant portion for him to be able to pay a team to help him build out, this sort of mini media empire. But it is quite impressive, but also nice to hear from someone who has, sort of struggled with legacy media himself, even though you wouldn't know it, to say, do it. Don't wait for someone to say, oh, we'll give you a shot now. And that's how I approached a series I launched on my newsletter. Well, I called it a vertical, like it's a magazine, but because traditional publishing wouldn't give me the green light. And I said, I was hemming and hawing, and I said, what do I do with this? Maybe I try to turn it into something else, a documentary, as though that's somehow easier. And he was like, do it yourself now.
I think that's a great point to mention traditional publishing as well, because we're talking a lot about media platforms and what we read short, long form, but as authors, all of us will have experienced the balance between putting a book together and what Substack can allow us to do in terms of supporting us while we're doing that, because in advance rarely covers it. So again, that complementary aspect is really important in terms of maintaining our writing life.
There's something which is super interesting, is that when you look at even Twitter back in days, there was an editorial team actually curating, adding, let's say, references, sources, facts. And that's something that I tend to miss somehow for now. That you have editorial projects in France like Context magazine. Typically, you have an amazing redaction, editorial staff with people that are actually professional of writing facts and not just opinion. And I think there is a sort of blurred or buffer area at the moment between opinion, maybe subcultural writing, culture and so on, politics, society, and basically the role of editorial in the middle ground. I tend to agree a lot with you. There's a lot of conservatism in France, because I would say that legacy media are more and more bought. But in the meantime, the recipe of Substack actually, in a way, not copied, but very, very similar to some of the editorial projects we see, currently funded by real people, going back to a subscription model. So I feel like it's, again, going back to the messy middle. That's interesting, because there is a sort of cultural war as well, in which we have a little role to play. And I like the fact that you don't oppose the two at all.
What you were saying about build and they will come is interesting, because a good friend of mine is Laura Riley. Some of you may know her Substack. It's spelled like magasin, but pronounced magazine. And it's basically a shopping Substack. It's she rounds up, it's like a shopping guide. She does a roundup of like what's hot and like what's on sale, what's new, and she it's been fascinating to watch her because we kind of started in fashion together. She was working at Hearst, she was an editor for like several different big magazines, and then during COVID she just did this, and she was kind of the first sort of bigger, she was the first to build as fashion on Substack, not the first, but one of the first, and it's just to see her grow since has been fascinating, because also now she's building out a team, she's hiring people, she makes a full-time living from this, and it's just really kind of amazing to see what you can do. But on that note, I wanted to ask you guys, some people have managed to make their Substack their principal source of income. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts on that, how feasible it is, because clearly, talking about legacy media, it's kind of easier to be like, I'm gonna pay, I don't know, $5 a month for New York Times, because it's kind of everything. You've got the cooking section, you've got everything else. And some writers, focus on one thing. So you can't really pay $5 a month for every single person you love. Some of us can't. Any thought?
Yeah, I think people are definitely going to filter out who they want to keep following and paying for, and then just with everything, I feel at some point in life we all kind of do like a spring cleaning, and that's just normal. But I also feel that everyone will always have their people. Everyone's gonna always have their community, and I know I'm sort of like, woo, but like it all works out, like you'll make what you're supposed to make, you'll get what you're supposed to get, and you're gonna have your people, and it's good.
What does a tarot reader think about that?
Yeah, well, I love the idea that everything works out, and I love a bit of woo-woo. For me, I would never want to put the pressure on my Substack to be my main and primary source of income. I really value it as an important part of the ecosystem for a number of reasons. It pays some of my bills, and it fuels me creatively. It connects me to a community. It helps me find new people, new writers who are interested in my work. But I love reading the tarot. And so I want people to connect either free or paid to me through Substack. I'm very happy either one. And then I want them to book time in with me, because that's part of what I love to do. I run brainstorming sessions with writers. So I work sometimes with other Substackers who are trying to figure out, I use the word. I want to figure out what they're going to write about next, or put an essay together. And I love that work, and I love that it's an important part of connecting me to the work I want to do, and it's important to me in terms of how it positions the books that I want to write next, and how it's allowing me the space now for the first time in 5 years not to be working on a book, because I get to think about what I want to do there, and that's an important part of my creative process. And I love that my audience moves with me. There's churn, and I think that's an important part of it, and I want to leave room for that. So I love that I can count on some income, regular income from my writing, and I get to experiment and play in the process of that. And I love that it's not my be-all end-all at the same time.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly how I feel, also sort of with the data that I have about my audience too. I know that 90% of the people who subscribe open the newsletters in their inbox, so they're not using the Substack app. But the growth that I have gotten from being on Substack has come largely through the Substack community. So I try to follow. I don't want to rely on anything, not one client. It's the same as being a freelancer, basically. So I look at this as being great while it's here, and I hope it can continue. Maybe it'll lead to something else. But I'm now reaching my 10th anniversary as a freelancer, and so I'm very skeptical of putting too many eggs in one basket, just generally.
Fair. I will say, me personally, I definitely hopped on the Substack wagon thinking I was going to make some extra cash out of it, because a friend made it just sound so easy, and by doing something that you already do. And since writing, I've found that I really love doing what I do. I spend so much time coming up with themes for my newsletters, and then deep diving into the different concepts. And at the end, I was trying to figure out a strategy of like when to start the paywall, and then what that would mean, and what people who paid would get. And then I did it, and like practically no one opened it, and no one read like this huge interview that I worked so hard to get and like then at some point I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take the paywall off. I have 15 paid subscribers, which is a big deal for me. But that I would prefer that everyone just was able to read it first and foremost and build my community that way. And I mean, knock on wood, like I'd love to make some money off of this at some point by doing what I love. But I like what you're saying, Chelsey, it's not my end all be all, but I still love getting to do what I do on it. Laurent?
Yeah, in my case, it's a bit like you guys. So I'm not a freelancer. I'm on the corporate side of things. The devil is there. I'm actually paid. I would say it's very weird, but in reputation. Since I started again to write, what's been pretty incredible is that internally, in the group I work for, suddenly it gave me more gravitas. Because suddenly someone was not bragging, but basically saying stuff that were meeting a sort of broader audience than just the company. So, and it was way more, I would say, relevant than a LinkedIn post typically, because there was this long form content, because people actually can find you. So that makes a sort of magic using a logical flow of writing. The second thing that I'm paid with Substack, I would say, it's the love science. I mean, it sounds very naive and candid, but you have no idea how pleasant it is to receive an email from someone you had no clue who this is, that is going to enrich your thinking. I mean, I sometimes receive nerdy emails at 1 a.m. of people that are actually way smarter than I am, but that are going to give you the right resource that inform, I would say, the rest of the thinking. So that's pretty crazy. And in addition to this, after I think it's 2 or 3 years now, I'm actually called to teach, to write books, to actually do extra activities on top of my normal job. So I should thank Substack every day. Thank you guys. But I would say it's really a ping pong effect. The ping is that you send a signal somewhere. The pong is actually the people bringing back to you or sending back to you a sort of positive signal and the possibility to create the second phase of your journey. Which leads me to another question. What does community, because community, it's a word everybody uses. Like Instagram, on one side they tell you, hey, we have AI killing the creators, but we love communities. You have X, let's not talk about X. And I feel like on Substack, what you guys are doing, you've kept on repeating this notion of community. So how would you qualify your community, and what does it bring to you? Do you even have a community? I mean, how do you call it?
I call it a community. I run weekly live sessions for paying members of the Shuffle. We tarot journal together. It's really lovely. It's a part of my ritual that I opened up to my readers, and I find that really useful. I was having a conversation with a friend today. I was like, it's low maintenance for me. I put together the prompts beforehand. I tell people what they are, and then we spend time doing something that we love together. And that's the main community aspect to me, which is not the writing aspect, but that brings us into a conversation that then I get to write in response to through the publication. So for me, it's about balancing that, bringing people together, whether it's through an online group or through a conversation. I think there are really brilliant writers who do that through asking for comments, getting written replies, replying to other work. But it's that conversational aspect, and however you create it in your work and whatever feels good to you and feels like a person-to-person connection rather than give me engagement, give me likes because I want to be seen. It's I want to see you and want you to see me back. Is that on the woo side?
I give you an A. Thank you.
I don't know that I have much more to add, to be honest. I don't use it's good what you're doing in the sense of creating almost a physical but online community with your subscribers. I see it more as the support I get when I put something out there from other writers on the platform who I really respect. But also me going to other people and feeling like I'm showing up in their comments because I'm learning something and I want to support them. And so it's more the support than a community of, let's get together and, take this one step further.
It's showing up in a different way.
Yeah, exactly.
The community aspect for me, I think it's basically we're learning together. I really, really feel that even the people who are following me on Substack, they understand that I'm new to Substack, and I when I'm confused or just don't know the path to take, I will literally write in a newsletter, be like, so guys, I don't know how to like charge for that. What do you guys want to pay for an article, or what are you comfortable with? Or I'll put a poll up. So it's really about also getting feedback about what they have in mind, what they're comfortable with, because sometimes I just don't know.
And what about you, Quinn? Because I think your community is extremely versatile, because you talk about food, about fashion, about pop culture, and about curation and art somehow. So you blend all these elements, and I think the people who like following you, they are not, let's say, the same kind of people. They actually reunite around your platform. So how do you feel about that?
Not gonna lie, my community is niche, and I think they have to be kind of weird like me to appreciate it, just because it's so specific. So if you're not familiar with what I write, I focus on food, but I pivot whether it's food and fashion, food and culture, food and history, food and entertainment. Just as long as it's related to food, I'm covering it. And I've found
This is Quinn's fun.
yeah, so I don't know, I've really found community through it, and like what you said, sometimes just one email from someone I don't know who they are, and they're just like, this is amazing, like I really like what you do, and I'm like, oh, someone besides my mom or the 5 friends I like emailed to open my email to boost my stats read it. And that's really, it's both humbling but also just so flattering, and then it really just takes one to kind of motivate you to keep going. So I've definitely found community on Substack, and because even though I'm food centric, because I cover all those topics, it's allowed me to kind of like leave it open to people. Some people might actually just look at my newsletter for the photos, and some do it for the content, so yeah.
Cool. Shall we move on?
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna pivot here, guys, on a pretty meaty topic. So bear with me, because I've got some reference points here. But what I'd like to talk about is the question of free speech and what it means specifically for Substack has been floating around since 2023, but even longer than that, I'm sure. But specifically, there was an article published by Jonathan M. Katz for The Atlantic called, quote, "Substack has a Nazi problem." And since joining Substack less than a year ago, the few people that I've followed and subscribed to, there are quite a few that have left Substack announcing for a multitude of reasons, but one of them usually being political. Another one that I referenced earlier, who writes Wordloaf, Andrew Janjigian, announced yesterday his departure. So one of the reasons was not wanting to be identified as Substack only, and the other reason was quoting that Substack has a Nazi problem. He goes on, and so another thing to reference is on January 29th, the CEO of Substack, Chris Best, sent out a newsletter platform-wide titled "The Fight for Free Speech in 2025 and Beyond." And in this newsletter, he says, quote, "Elon Musk has been a vocal supporter of free speech. It's no secret that we haven't always seen eye to eye, but he deserves a lot of credit for advancing freedom of speech on X before it was popular and in the face of fierce criticism and opposition," end quote. LOL. He also goes on to say, "As a platform, we are committed to supporting the speech rights of creators and their audiences, so we avoid political or business commitments that conflict with this mission." I think every platform has issues of this, and if we're talking about free speech, then what exactly does that mean? Are we gonna go free all the way, or are we gonna free it just to the point of it, jostling some feathers? And the last thing I wanna just reference really quickly is Andrew Janjigian, who announced his departure, was saying, Substack's Nazi problem, he said, "Something I and many others wrote about more than 2 years ago has not gone away. Many of the same bad actors continue peddling dangerous and hateful information and making a decent living doing it. I don't really want to have my own work associated with that, even just a little. I know that no platform is perfect and that there are fashy, vile people using Ghost, Beehive, and any other newsletter host. But here's what's different about Substack. They prop up and promote some of these voices, whether because they agree with them or simply because they make them lots and lots of money. That's his stance. I'm not saying that's mine. But with all that said, I'm just curious what you guys think about this stance on free speech and what it means to you. And if this stance is applicable to every platform or if there are exceptions. That's a lot, sorry.
No, I mean, I knew about this. This is, you know, there was a first round of departures a couple years ago, maybe even a year and a half ago. I mean, it's a very heavy topic. And the only thing I can think of is that we are all still using Meta products. We all still use iPhones with very problematic production methods, often with child labor. I mean, none of this is okay. I would hope that the presence of some of us who are putting forth thoughtful material, we can continue to put pressure on leadership at any of these companies, but ultimately until every single person decides to take a step back and drop out, you know, I don't know that we can move the dial. So do we leave everywhere, or do we hope that our response to disinformation and fascist thinking helps be part of the resistance, so to speak?
Right, and I bring this up not to, you know,
No, I know. It's
Substack or anything.
and it's uncomfortable because all of us who, you know, are the boycott last week in America for one single day is, I mean, to me, completely preposterous. And unless there's something sustained, and then people are willing to do something that's very uncomfortable in a sustained way, it's all posturing.
Because let's face it too, if everyone left Substack and went to something else, that something else would also be a host.
I mean,
So
this is the thing, and also the person you referenced, Wordloaf, he said that he would continue to read people he respects
and support.
and
He
support
literally-
them on Substack.
He subscribed to me today because I told him, you know, I read his thing, and he immediately subscribed, and he's like, let's.
So I think there's a complicated nature and feeling around these issues, and that we all are going to have to face at some point, because literally everywhere we go, in person or online, we are now confronted with the realities of this and this moment. So I would, yes, that word vomit is my answer for the moment.
Thank you.
Oh, so you have one.
Chelsey, Yanique?
I think this comes back to that question of identity that we talked about as well. I think when we can divorce ourselves from naming ourselves after any one platform, brand, etc., it's really useful in terms of figuring out how we show up. For me, it was a question mark. I launched the shuffle, and shortly afterwards, the first kind of waves of departure happened. I've had unsubscribes from people who don't want to be associated with the platform. It's something that's on my mind, and for me, all I can do anywhere I show up is show up as an example of someone who I'd want to know, somebody who I would want to interact with. I would love to see hate speech demonetized. Quite frankly, I think that would be lovely. But in the meantime, I would really love for wherever people can find me to be a safe place for them, whether that's on Substack or Instagram or through a mailing list or whatever. I want to be visible as a safe place to them, and Substack allows me to do that as a platform. I would love to see more of that and less of the other thing.
No, I think that's a really good point, because as we were saying, everyone was someone and doing something before any platform, whether it's Substack or any other platform, and you're still that someone afterwards. And besides, you know, hate being, you know, in existence anywhere, there's also a lot of love and community and just support. And that's a really important thing to remember and keep in mind and try to really push as well. Yanique?
I totally agree that we sort of have to, it's gonna sound weird, but in a way sort of plant flowers or just show up more as who you really truly are, just because there's no way we're gonna fully eradicate hate speech, you know? So all right, that's what you want to talk about. Well, I'm gonna show up as who I am, even though you're against who I am.
Because to be
and,
fair,
and that in itself is actually enough.
yeah. Because to be honest, we're talking very specifically about a very specific type of hate speech, but there's also haters and trolls in the comments anyway. So there's those people too. Like even if everything's flowers and ponies and you know, you're gonna have someone that's just like, you know, shit on your day, like in your comments. But
I don't know if you plan to open it up to the audience.
I will.
I'm actually
We
curious. Me too.
we will get to Q&A at the end, so definitely like have your questions ready because we do want to open up to you guys, but we just have a few more points to get through before then. But I'll definitely bring this subject back up again if someone has anything to say about that.
Cool. So
Thank
let's-
you guys.
Thank you. Let's maybe pivot to something more light. I'm not a Nazi, I have to say. Not that I'm aware. So it's basically Paris Fashion Week at the moment.
Big pivot.
Big pivot, I know. Because if we get started on politics, you are there with steps until 11 p.m.
He is French, so
Yeah, I'm French and I will avoid my Frenchness this time. So, it's Paris Fashion Week and there's something very, very intriguing is that a lot of fashion brands, actually, luxury brands, are starting to explore ways to collaborate with Substack writers, Substack authors. Why? Because there is a rising interest for long-form content. You see all these brands investing in podcasts, in trying to tap into their archives, memories, and so on. So one of the questions we have, maybe you've already collaborated with some brands. So what could be a genuinely interesting way to work with these brands on your platform?
Us personally collaborate with
Yeah.
with a brand?
Or, I mean, it doesn't have to be fashion specifically, but like a paid partnership, because that's definitely something that people are foraying into on Substack.
I think it would definitely have to align with the DNA of my Substack and my community. I mean, in a way, why not do paid partnerships? Because Substack is also a place where you're being paid by your readers, but it would have to be authentic. You know, it's great collaborations are the ones that are really authentic. So.
I think the only thing I would do is try to offer something special to my subscribers. So if a brand, let's say it's a champagne brand or something, wanted to, I don't know, to offer a special visit to two of my readers, you know, I'd rather do it look something like that than any sort of content creation or curation or writing some sort of. I wouldn't do it like a branded piece or an advertorial. That just wouldn't. I don't think it would fit.
I mean, like, look, if there's any fashion brand out there that would like to imagine a tarot card for me, that would be gorgeous. I think from a creative standpoint, I'd be really open to, and the nature of my work, the nature of my publication is about re-envisioning archetypes through creative work, and so that's something I'd love to explore with the right partner, but from a creative angle that really mixed in with what I already do and how I already show up.
But were you also going to ask? I wondered if the line of thinking was also, would we as readers want to read branded, like if I don't know, like if Louis Vuitton came on with their own Substack, which they won't. Like, would we read that as consumers?
Well, that's a perfect segue, Lindsay. Thank you very much.
No, I was just curious because I'm also I wouldn't.
Yes.
But I also am not a consumer of a lot of things, and I'm incessantly surprised by the things people are willing to consume.
No, that's perfect how you say that, because I literally was, as we're talking about brands showing up on Substack, we now have brands like Tory Burch that have their own Substack. There's The Real Real, if you guys don't know, it's a fashion resale brand similar to Vestiaire Collective and that kind of thing. They've started a persona that's called, I think it's The Real Girl, and it's supposed to be like a Gossip Girl XOXO thing. And I actually read someone say something that like, in notes, I think they were like, if a brand has a Substack, I'm not trusting them.
I saw that.
So, yeah, let's talk about that. Like, me personally, I don't know. Because even, I have a hard time with influencers because I know exactly what's happening, and sometimes it works, but it's because I like the product to begin with. So whether they're pushing it, or if it was on a model, or straight from the brand, like, if I wanted it, I would get it. But when you know it's forced, and it's that paid collaboration, and then now it's a newsletter, a format that I'm already taking the time to read and allowing into my inbox, it's a lot.
I think that's it. I think it's their urgency to push more content and our need to step away from all of that and the consumerist cycle that it puts us in a format that really should be less consumerist. Well, I mean, the shopping Substacks are one thing, but I just mean
That's like specific, you know.
that's
what you're
specific,
signing up
yeah,
for.
you know what you're signing up for, but I don't want that to start filtering into, we already have Instagram ads, and I wish companies would just realize that we are submerged and they produce too much, and we need to have different conversations. So if they want to tell us with transparency about all of the ways they're trying to fix their business model so that they're not consuming or producing as much waste, like, I might actually read that.
Yeah.
But no.
Well, just specifically with the Real, I think it's interesting because they already have a newsletter that you sign up to as someone who shops on it.
So this is the second newsletter.
Yeah, but it's like a Substack newsletter. So it's like you're
Well, they're
already
probably trying to capitalize on the people who are using the Substack app.
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is it's a lot. I'm like I need a safe space.
So I was gonna say that I'm in the middle on that, just because there are a few brands that I follow and I get their newsletters and I really enjoy them. And I thought to myself when I saw that, I was just like, oh my god, that's gonna be so weird. But then brands like Gulli, or when I get an email from Aesop, I'm just like, oh my god, the storytelling is so on point. And that storytelling aspect, it doesn't feel forced, it doesn't feel like it feels like it's trying to sell me anything, and that's what I like about it. So
when it's incorporated seamlessly, then,
right,
yeah.
right. So I guess maybe it could work. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a case by case basis. I spent several years working in PR for brand design agencies, so I can see the thinking. I can, and I understand it. But I think it has to be right for the brand. I'm thinking of a company like WeTransfer, right, who runs a really beautiful editorial. If they showed up on Substack, I'd be like, yeah, of course. It makes sense. They're great storytellers, and I think that's what I'd be looking for: is what are you offering me an editorial experience that actually adds value to my life or not?
Right.
If a brand wanted to do a really interesting history deep dive into, a legacy brand wanted to do that, I might be interested in reading it. But it would have to be editorial first, and it would have to be really thoughtful, and I would hope that they would pay whoever they have on the back end of that, writing that content very well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I agree with that. It's really how you do it, because me personally, I also launched because I was launching a concept store, and I was like, I'm gonna need a newsletter, but I don't want the average newsletter that's like 20% off this weekend only. Like, I wanted information that was interesting, that people would subscribe to the newsletter even on its own. So in my newsletter, I have a shopping section, but you can also glaze over it, and it's also, I make it, so part of the theme that it's still fun, and I will slip some products from my shop in it sometimes, but it's natural. It's never like an in your face, like buy this now, and I think that's kind of the key to it. What do you think?
Yeah, and some brands have a very strong editorial culture. I don't know if you've ever read the Hermès, Le Monde d'Hermès, which has been running for decades now. When you read that, it's absolutely insane. It's 200 Substack writers working together. I mean, the quality of the craft, the editorial is absolutely insane. So I think, to your point, I think not all brands have this sort of editorial culture. Some can totally do it because they already do it so well for specific customers, niche communities, and so on. And indeed, it has to be fairly natural. I mean, you were mentioning Laurent magazine, sorry. When you look at the shopping references she brings, I mean, most of the time I'm not the target audience, but in reality it's a talent, it's a way of writing which is absolutely unique. So you end up with a curation of a shopping experience. So yeah, consumption, it's not bad, and actually it's pretty good because you learn something. So that's where I see something which can be very interesting, is the value added of your editorial approach. Right.
Well, on that note, we'd love to open it up to the audience now for Q&A.
Yes, I know pretty much a lot about my audience because you have you have the stats, you have the data. And also it depends also if you started with a list, let's say, if you're coming from MailChimp. A lot of I'd say 50% of my subscribers came from my blog, and then the rest actually also came from Substack, and so I have all their info. But in terms of, what was the second part of the question?
Your profile?
Their profile is offline events. I think was the second part of the question. I've been thinking about offline events, but then I'm just like, oh my god, another thing to do. But why not if I can find a way to incorporate that in an easy way? I think it would be so fun.
Yeah, I mean, my audience seems to be quite complementary to the audience on other platforms, which makes sense. I mean, they're coming to me for a very specific thing. I know that the majority are US based, and then the second biggest audience is in France. I know that they have very specific interests. I know that some of them drop off when I go too hard on political and societal issues, but then I get like 10 others in their place, right, who are there for, So I think it's quite interesting to review that data, but not get too obsessed with it, because you can. And offline events, it's tricky, since most of my sort of like ride and die paid subscribers are in the US. So if I organize something here, it's kind of unlikely that they could necessarily be here, but I have thought about something online and digital and maybe a live, like what you do, or some sort of digital gathering, which I think could be interesting if it's the right theme and the right purpose.
Yeah, I know a fair amount about the people who are subscribed to me, particularly my paid subscribers tend to be people that I've had conversations with and I get to know them, and of course they can use the data. I also really love Substack's recommendations feature because you can see how you're overlapping with other publications, and you can see and recommend each other and kind of find your space and your wider community, and then figure out who you want to support and who can support you based on what your readers are reading. In terms of offline events, I published a book in January, and I went to London in February to do some events, and I invited my Substack audience to join me. I've got a very diverse readership between the US, the UK, here in France, and then a little bit elsewhere. But people came. It was really nice. People showed up. People that I hadn't met outside of Substack came. They were represented there, and that was really, really nice. It wasn't a Substack meetup, but they were invited because they're part of my life, and it was really cool to meet them.
Yeah, same as what you said, actually. I really like this about Substack is you get to see who recommended you, and anytime you get a new sign up, you can see where that source came from. So it could be Laurent recommended me, or someone forwarded my email, and you can see that person, forwarded the email, or you got it directly from the app. So that's really, really helpful intel. And then what else? Yeah, my readership is mostly America-based in France. Got some in Australia, in UK. And then for events, I've done PR and organized events for the better half of the last decade, so that's in my blood. And with my concept store and everything, I'm always trying to do, more in-person things, and I love getting people together, so that's always on my mind.
Yeah, so I have a small community of I think 3,000 subscribers, but I write in French and English. And it's very interesting because in English, actually you attract Brazilians, Mexico, basically people that are looking for internet culture kind of content from so many different places. And most of the time in English, the people are extremely digital savvy with a sort of nest of values and insights and intel, super advanced when it comes to technology. In France, it's a bit different. It's a bit more a sort of political kind of community, also digital savvy, into society topics. So it's not exactly the same. And going back to what the guys were mentioning, what's super strong with Substack, that sometimes you think that just an email address is just an email address. But because of the recommendation system, you actually start qualifying, in a sort of always more precise way, the type of people that you attract. So progressively you reach a critical mass, and in a way the engine starts working for you. So that's
It's like an ecosystem.
it's like an ecosystem, and it's pretty close to e-commerce somehow. So it's very strange because it's both artisanal and very, I would say, automated in the meantime. Any other question?
Okay, so what would you say to someone who's been a MailChimper, if that's a word, thinking about Substack, besides the money issue? What are the advantages? Or maybe there's something you missed if you moved from MailChimp. And if I may, another question, how do you decide between free and paid content, like what to put out there?
Thank you.
So I moved from MailChimp because it was also starting to become a bit overwhelming to use the MailChimp interface, to be honest. I'd say that what I love about Substack is that also there is a community that is already there, and people can find you within the Substack community, where no one's gonna find me in the MailChimp community, right? And so that for me was so important. And another thing is, Substack really made my life so much easier because I felt like I could just type something up. It didn't necessarily have to be super pretty or anything, just because the vibe on Substack is already so, it's one where people are so just used to getting all different types of content, where I almost felt like I wasn't necessarily judged on how pretty my newsletter is. And so it makes me even feel more comfortable to put out just great information, or just even iPhone photos, but the info is, the article is great, but I only have iPhone photos, and that is actually enough.
Have you seen you've seen the interface of Substack?
Not the latest, but
Because it's very minimalist, right? It's not meant to have all the bells and whistles of like a super designed newsletter like MailChimp. MailChimp is also a CRM, so like if you're just a writer, you're probably using 1% of its actual function. And so that's also why we were saying it costs too much for our needs. What else does Substack offer? Or no, your question was about content and deciding what goes behind the paper.
yeah.
I tend to try to offer at least one piece a month that's free, but because I sometimes want more eyeballs on things, I give quite a lot, and then if I add a paywall, I add it like 3/4 of the way down, so that there's some extra nugget that everybody else gets that not everybody can have. And so sometimes it's putting this sort of juiciest information, behind paywall, or a certain conversation that gets entirely paywalled because that's something special, and but you have to have an added value for for the paid subscribers, and so that can vary, but you want to have it, we want to have a certain consistency.
Maybe it's
I wanted to answer that question as well, because I write a Substack newsletter, and for work I also send out a newsletter with MailChimp, and it's not a marketing newsletter, it's more of a newsletter as product thing, so it's kind of like more of a paid magazine thing, okay? And we still use MailChimp. We're thinking about moving away from it and maybe use Revo. Sorry, like adding a new name into the hat. But I would say that obviously you have, I think in terms of the community thing, that's been covered by everyone, and so the discoverability of everything makes Substack this thing where it can really help your growth. I would say because Substack is amazing in terms of the interface is so easy to use. It's kind of like just writing an email in your
It's super
outbox.
user friendly, yeah.
But I would say I think you also run the risk of all Substacks kind of look the same. So you have less of that customization, identity that you could have with other newsletter platforms that could allow you to code some of it and stuff. So it kind of is up to you. If you have a product that's also very visual led, you might not think that Substack is for you. I think that's a big thing, but it's also a pain in the ass. MailChimp is
It's really annoying to say.
Also, you can create get a logo or a proper header for your newsletter, but it's true, you're not gonna have all the same bells and whistles.
And MailChimp or most mailing things is you have segments. So if you have people who bought something, you don't have segmentation, it's separate paid and not paid.
Also a good point, yeah. It depends if you're doing something for a personal thing or you're trying to, you have business objectives.
I will
It's
say
delicate.
though, I've seen a lot of different Substacks sort of start to jump in on the customization. Like I saw one recently where she made, because there's dividers where you can separate sections, and she kind of made her own. So it's really just an image, but it's still a different divider at the
I
end.
use a JPEG divider and I love it. It's just a nice.
It's so cute. It's
color.
a little detail, but for those that are technologically challenged, I'm one of them. I'm very happy that it's just very user friendly. Like the fact that I only have so many fonts to choose from, I'm happy because that would take me the whole day just to choose.
Hey everyone, actually I want to answer, I'm a Substack rookie and I'm coming over from MailChimp. The one thing besides segmenting that you can't do, I don't think you can customize like to your first name or whatever. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure, I don't play with it enough. To make it like, you know, when you get the email, dear Lindsey, instead of dear reader.
Right.
Minor, maybe not a huge deal. My question is, teleport yourself back to day 1, day 7 when you were in Substack. Part of what the big attraction for me, MailChimp versus this, is community, right? Every person has said that they've had a great way to connect the community. I was wondering if you could maybe detail that a little bit from your own experience. How did you connect with your community? Was it, you know, seeing other people's posts on Substack and sort of commenting and then they follow you, or are there other things that you recommend to us that would be good practices? Thanks.
I asked everybody that I knew that I thought would enjoy it to read it. I didn't send it to all of my family and friends, and in fact I avoided that. But anybody that I had a connection with, who I felt like had enjoyed anything I'd read before, I asked them to read it. And I looked to my other communities as well and asked people to read it. And that was, it sounds simple, but I think that's the first thing, is putting it in front of people you think would enjoy it. And if you've got a personal connection with those people, all the better. If they're just somebody that you've seen around on any other platform or through a friend of a friend that you think would enjoy it, ask them to read it.
If I may, I think you need to be very generous. Like, and that's probably the difference with other types of mailing or emailing stuff, is that you only get what you're gonna give. So it seems very naive, but at the beginning you need to give a lot to people who reply to you. It's still one of the last platforms where the outbound links, so actually quoting someone, adding a link to someone, the hypertext basically, is actually valued. Think about TikTok or even Instagram, the URL, I mean, not to go too much into detail, but has sort of faded away. Even on Google, you used to be lowered in the former page rank if too many outbound links were added to your post. You go on Substack, everything is made to actually quote, recommend, so make your little space a space for others. And that's, I mean, basically we'll have different stories, but with Khuyen, that's probably what also happened in an organic way. We don't have necessarily the same type of topics, but my people are going to be interested in what Khuyen actually has to say. For the same reason I did actually, beyond the fact that we're friends. And on the other way around, when Khuyen recommends me, what's super interesting is that I attract another kind of people, and it refreshes the community. And that's really that, is that a community, it's not a static stuff. Like sometimes we say community equals women, 18, 25 years old, Gen Z, progressive, and it doesn't mean shit in reality. The reality is that you connect because you have a awareness, you have a passion, you have a sort of weak ties on a specific topic. Tarot card reading, again, I'm pretty sure it attracts a fairly diverse bunch of people, from faith to probably educative elements. So this notion of generosity, I think, is key.
I would even say that one of the most important aspects of Substack that I've discovered just using Substack is just the passion. People can feel the passion in your writing, like the people that I follow or follow me, we have similar passions. So if you're just writing from a place of passion, whatever it is that you're writing about, first of all, get started, but whatever it is that you're writing about, if you're writing from a place of passion, in the Substack community, for some reason that really comes through, and people just really want to be a part of your passion world because it's also their passion world, if that kind of makes sense.
It's very genuine, and what I will say too is, very honestly, when I first started, I was so excited about it, and I was like, I think I have a pretty unique concept, like it's gonna be very cool. And then I got on it and started seeing everyone on Notes and discovering all these other Substacks and writers, and I was so overwhelmed. Honestly, at some point I was like, why even bother? Like, there's so many good writers that are published people that do it for a living and all this, and I was like, who cares about what I have to say? Like, I have probably 10,000 grammar mistakes and that kind of thing. But then you work through that, and then you start to see, like, especially on Notes, you know, I've done social media and paid attention to influencers and worked with them for so long, and even when I post on Insta stories, I have to think about it and curate it. But then I found that on Notes, like, it's just unfiltered. It's just, if I saw something and really loved it, I'm gonna throw it on there, and 5 other people who really, really like it are gonna connect with me, and that's all that I need. I don't need 20,000 likes on it, because who cares, you know?
I want to even say it, Substack feels almost like a safer space. I don't know for you guys, but like for me, it feels like a safer space to me compared to Instagram, YouTube, wherever. I don't know if it's because of the long format where you're kind of going more in detail and you're being more vulnerable. I'm curious, like, if you guys feel that way. I don't know.
Just really quick, I feel like Substack is very much like a you do you vibe.
Right.
And like, yeah.
It is. I mean, but like you said, I think there's a way that you don't get the same kind of community, I guess, if you're as a reader only reading it in your inbox. So you have to sort of cultivate either in your email, because sometimes I'll get people who respond, you know, they just hit reply to the email that they got, right? And so they're not coming on to do to engage with me on the Substack app and platform. So just to differentiate between those two things. But I will still respond over email. I don't care where they're connecting with me. And so I think that's the thing. If you're willing to engage back, and also tell the writers that you like on there, or the other people with newsletters, tell them what you think. If they put out a question to their readers, which a lot of people, you know, a lot of creators do and writers do, engage with it. And sometimes other readers in the comments section are the people you're going to start to connect with. It feels like the old blogging days, to be honest, where you give a little, you get, and you see what develops from there.
Yeah, I feel like the Substack community, you really do have to put the work in, but you do really get stuff back. Like, you really have to find your people and interact with them, and authentically. Like, whenever I reference someone in my newsletter, it's, you know, a proper quote that's in line with what I think, and I actually do read their stuff. It's not like on Instagram where it's just like, I don't know, it's not like a follow for follow situation, you know what I mean? It's very much like, I'm reading you and I'm supporting you, and I hope you do the same for me, but even if you don't, like, I love your stuff. And then it goes from there. But you do have to do the work, I will say.
And you have a component of ritual as well. And lots of writers actually publish at a certain pace. So people start expecting you a little bit more. A bit like the radio show, remember, you know, you have the jingle, there is a format, so you expect the guy, you don't know what you're gonna buy when you open the email. Maybe it's gonna be bad, but still, you need to open it because it's part of the ritual. And again, I think what you say, I mean, I totally feel you and relate to this, is that it's a safe place. It brings you this sort of energy and candor of the early days of blogging. And I mean, honestly, on Instagram, you know, there is this quote that says, oh, I do one for the gram and one for me. It's not from me, it's from a current exchange, typically. So I need to put myself a bit more in a nude and sexy way, and then I'll do my real content. I mean, that's terrible. And when you consider that, it's terrible, because then what are we? On Substack, it's way different. Is that it's extremely, exactly what you can say, is that I have something to say, I dare saying this way. Maybe it's going to meet an audience or not. But when it does, there is something so pleasing, because you generally have people who are going to give you some time, reply, and this signals, again, as a sort of mini writer, you don't find this in any other platform, because there's something very real. And the relationship you have, because the community is also about the ties you build with the community, you kind of earn email addresses. And I mean, email is super intimate, it's super personal. I mean, it's not just following someone like 20 million people. And we are still in this golden age of Substack because we don't know how it's going to be in 2 or 3 years. But for now, there's still this sort of pioneering aspect to it where it's still fairly safe because you don't have yet so many people either. So there's still something extremely raw and very real in the way people talk to each other.
I think it's also worth remembering that the boom of newsletters has been helped along by our frustration with the snackable content that exists everywhere else. So if people are hungry for more connection and hungry for more stories, they will go where they can get that.
Any other
Question.
questions? Yeah.
It's about the snackable content. We were talking tonight about how on Substack the content is more written, more longer. You have like the street connections also with your readers. But I also follow some Substackers, and I see it more on the fashion side, where you have a lot of snack content, where you have like maybe 5 links, 5 tops to buy, 5 like very more commercial, and I feel it. I've been seeing it more and more. Do you think that Substack is going also to shift like any other platform towards that content, or Substack is Substack because it has the long, curated and well-written articles?
I think many of us got on because we were told it was a place for writers, but of course, I guess no one can survive on writers alone, right? I mean, I wish they could. I mean, it's the same thing that happens with publishing. We want writers, but actually, we just want things we know that will sell, and even if it's poorly written, we're still going to throw some money at it. So I think ultimately, all of that is going to exist on there, just like there will be video, and maybe some people will consume that, maybe people won't, but there's definitely still a place for long form. It just depends on, you know, whether you as a reader want to seek that out, or if, you know, like if you wanted a fashion newsletter that goes in depth on something and isn't that snackable stuff, they're out there. I mean, I follow a couple who are super smart and were effectively reporters who then moved over. But the snackable stuff exists, I think, because there is surely an audience for that. But I wouldn't say that it's all gonna, like, well, all the long form will vanish. I think it's just gonna be a mix.
And I think some people do both, and that's okay. I follow some fashion Substackers that definitely do both.
Well, I wanted to say really quickly too, this is something I've definitely noticed just because of my background in fashion. I found that a lot of influencers who've sort of transferred over to Substack, it's just the easiest thing for them to do is kind of like, I don't know, 1 coat 4 ways and like 5 things you should buy this winter or something like that. And that could evolve because they're finding their footing on Substack as well. That's not what their whole career has been based on. It's not what they're used to. And that just might be their lane, and they might love it, and their audience might love it as well, so it might not matter. But I think there's definitely room for evolution.
Coming from former BuzzFeed writer, I sat on that publication for a really long time, and some days I wrote quizzes about pizza, and some days I got to commission really, really beautiful, intimate essays about health anxiety and postpartum depression, and those lived in tandem there together. Not forever, but they did for a really long time, and sometimes the same reader wanted both of those things. The same writer was working on them, and I think we contain multitudes, and I think I love mixed platform or mixed format work. I love a bit of short form and a bit of long form, and I'm hungry for a snack sometimes, and I'm hungry for a meal sometimes. And as a writer and as a consumer, I want both of those things depending on how much time I have, what brain space I'm in, and I'm not afraid of that threatening the way that I bring myself to the platform.
I love knowing what pizza I am.
How do you think I became a tarot reader? That started there.
2 last questions, and then we will keep chatting but in a more informal way.
So Yanique and Chelsey, you both have service-based businesses, right? You have a travel company and you tarot cards and maybe some other things, or tarot readings. When you want to make an offer, so I'm assuming you used to make offers every so often on MailChimp. So when you want to present an offer, you do that on Substack, and how, I'm assuming you will do that on Substack, like, hey, I've got this service I'm offering, or no?
So for me, I'm also a tour guide, so that's the service that I offer. To be really honest, because my blog is so old and so well referenced, I do a lot of my offerings just on my blog, just because that's where I get the most traffic. And then if I really want to push anything, I go to my returning clients and I use Shopify, actually. I don't really sell anything on Substack. I mean, I guess I could, but I don't. Not yet.
Yeah, I do. First and foremost, I used to, a lot of my businesses in group online workshops, writing workshops, using the tarot to develop your characters or using the tarot to journal, and that's all moved on Substack. That's available to that community now who are paying members. So in some sense, that offer is always there as part of the way that my business is moved. But I also, because readings are very important to me and a huge part of my business ecosystem, when I run workshops, I tie a new reading in, so I use the exclusivity and the novelty of whatever I'm talking about in that moment on Substack to go, and you could get a tarot reading about this topic that I'm talking about. So if I'm writing an essay about burnout, which I have been for the past year and a half, eventually there will be a reading that's inspired by some of the findings through that. So I let the creative work inform my offer, and my offer inform the creative work, and I found that really fun to reimagine.
I saw you have it as part of your paid tiers as well. Like you would offer a 30-minute tarot
Yeah,
reading
for my
for
founding
a
membership.
founding member. Okay.
I offer a 30-minute tarot reading, and then anyone who's a paid subscriber it qualifies for 20% off a reading with me. Thank you for looking. I'm honored. It's working here.
We do have QR codes in case you wanted to check out anyone's Substack.
I only sell reputation, remember. So maybe a last question, and then we can chat in more informal way. Is there someone?
We can mingle after.
We can, exactly. Any last question?
Yeah.
Thank you for asking this question. So because I'm not on Substack yet, so for everyone understood is that if you want to subscribe to a writer, you have to pay to this individual writer.
You don't have to. It's there's options like when you sign up automatically. Actually, I found it very confusing. I don't know about for you guys, because for example, when my mom tried to sign up for the first time, it leads you to this page where it kind of has it in sections. You can be a paid. I think it automatically puts you on that. You can click on becoming a free subscriber, and I think a lot of people are daunted by seeing the paid part, and they will automatically exit out of it. Like my mom was like, am I paying for this? Like, she's like, I can, but like, what, you know? And then I have to really inform people that like, no, there's a free option. You can just do that first. So you don't have to, if you want to subscribe to someone.
But when you subscribe, it's still like an individual writer. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So my question was, maybe this is a bit controversial question. I'm just imagining
We like that.
the business model of Substack, because I was just imagining maybe, I don't know if they're doing it, maybe they could provide like a subscription option of by interest categories or by like collectives.
Right, that sounds like math.
Like
Subscriptions.
Or like just in general as a platform, because I'm just imagining, because now for example, if you want to watch a movie on YouTube, you can like pay for one individual movie, and also but like you can also pay for a subscription. So I'm just thinking
Like a streaming service, like you have a streaming service where you rent a movie for 24 hours, just the one thing.
Yeah. So I'm just interested in your thoughts about this. Have you ever considered like starting as a group or like a collective?
I think financially that's kind of complicated now.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Payment model.
maybe we are not Substack. We're just using Substack. So we can sell our consultancy skill for sure. But, no, now to your point, what's super interesting is that indeed within the network, within the communities that operate on Substack, some people are starting to ask, should we launch a collective? And they already do in a way, like multiple authors on one platform. So I think it's like any new platform somehow. Is that the business model also operates and appears on the go, because there is a blend, and again I don't want to talk on behalf of Substack, but there is a blend of opportunism and a blend of real business model with your roadmap plan, whether it's technological, IT, financial, and so on. That we don't know because we are not in the
But
secrets of God.
Isn't there something where it's like a referral system, and if you get
Yeah.
referred, then you get like a discount or something
But
like
that's for
that?
the users, not
That's for the user,
for,
but not for
okay.
Substack.
And there is now, you can opt in to offer a discounted subscription to your publication to someone who's just subscribed to one of your recommended. So I collaborate a lot with a creator called the Tarot Professor, and we recommend each other back and forth quite often. People who subscribe paid to the Tarot Professor, I can opt in to say, now offer them a discounted subscription to me, which if somebody's interested in tarot, then they may very well go, well, why not? But that's the closest I think that it's coming now.
And from the user perspective, so us, indeed, what we see is more and more people turning on the subscription model, basically, the paid one, to access the archives, which is not idiot at all, because when you consider that, maybe you're going to create an attraction for a certain kind of explanation of the world in one field. So basically, opening your archives is also a feature you have within Substack, which is extremely powerful because suddenly it's both a recognition of your work and also something you truly give to a community, to a user. So again, there are some, if you want, blurbs of beginnings of opportunities to make money, but it's a bit, changing. I mean, they're adding new features on the go, which is totally normal. So the only thing we can tell you is open one. Do the math, and I think that's going to be more probably self-explanatory. Cool.
Create a
Yeah.
magazine.
So thanks a lot. Oh, sorry.
Thank you so much.
No,
to
no.
everyone. Yeah, thank you so much for the speakers for taking the time. Thank you everyone for coming. Again, you can find every QR code is everyone's Substack up here. If you took any photos tonight and want to tag us, that'd be really cool for us to see. And yeah, we'll just mingle. So if anyone wants to come up and chat with any of us, we're here for a little bit. So thank you.
Thank you.